So, as we jump into our day, I would like to present or introduce our first speaker. Our first session today is the Lawyer Referral Service for Sexual Harassment in the Workplace, a Safer Places New Brunswick update. And our first presenter is Amber Chisholm. Amber is a lawyer working in Fredericton, New Brunswick, as the Associate Director of Public Legal Education and Information Services of New Brunswick, a nonprofit organization that informs New Brunswickers about the law, their legal rights and obligations, and their legal rights and obligations. As Associate Director, she oversees many of PLEAS's projects, including Safer Places New Brunswick, a major project funded by the Department of Justice Canada, whose goal is to develop tools and resources to help address sexual harassment in the workplace. She also acts as an organization partner and support supervisor for the Imprint Trans ID Clinic, organized through the UMB chapter of Pro Bono Students Canada. Amber is also a really strong member of the Workplace Violence and Abuse Research Team, which we are always really proud of. Amber's hobbies include community theater, painting, and complaining about online culture to her many pets. And so I want to welcome Amber this morning and open up the floor for Amber's presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you for the introduction, Nicole. I am going to share my screen because I have a presentation prepared. So let me know if you can see my screen and not my notes. How does that look?
It's perfect.
Yep. Great. Okay, thank you so much. So hi, everybody. As Nicole said, my name is Amber Chisholm. I'm going to be talking to you today about an initiative through our Safer Places NB initiative at Public Legal Education, specifically our new lawyer referral service. So I will get into explaining exactly what all of that means very shortly. First, I do know that Nicole gave a land acknowledgement just now, but I think it does bear repeating that Please NB does respectfully acknowledge that we are located on the unceded territory of the Wolastoqiyik, the Mi'kmaq, and the Pescatomakati peoples. The territory is covered by the Peace and Friendship Treaties of 1725, which did not include the surrender of land and resources, but instead recognized Wolastoqiyik, Mi'kmaq, and Pescatomakati title and established the rules for what was to be an ongoing relationship between nations. Please NB recognizes that there can be no reconciliation until the truth is known. Indigenous people and settlers need to know the reality regarding the treatment of Indigenous peoples in Canada, and we support the need to investigate all residential schools and day schools throughout Canada, and also acknowledge that these investigations need to be Indigenous-driven, community-based, survivor-centric, and culturally sensitive. For a brief overview of the presentation I'm going to give today, I have 55 or so minutes. I will be going until 9:55 with hopefully time built in for questions. So do feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A function, and I'll do my best to answer them or tell you how to get in touch with us for further information. I'll start by giving you a brief overview of the Safer Places NB project as a whole, as it has evolved until now. And then I will dive into the lawyer referral program. I'll explain exactly what it is, what the nature of summary legal advice is, which is what's provided through the project, how you can apply for the program, current user rates, and I'll go through an overview of some of the program policies and other resources available through this project. So once again, my name's Amber Chisholm. I'm Associate Director at Public Legal Education and Information Service of New Brunswick. I've been working on this project since its inception, right from when the initial grant application went in to when we started kind of brainstorming exactly how this project was going to come into being. I'm really excited to be here today to discuss with you the newest developments and resources that we have available to you and to New Brunswickers through this project. I was here last year at Respectful Workplace Week giving an overview of the Safer Places NB project as a whole, and there are quite a few resources available on the website saferplacesnb.ca, and in French that's lieu plus sur nb.ca. So first, I'm going to give you a bit of an overview about our organization. So Please NB is a nonprofit charitable organization. Our mandate is to promote access to justice and access to the legal system by developing plain language, bilingual educational information and resources and services about the law. For more than 30 years, our mandate has been to develop bilingual materials and educational products and services for the general public in order to promote that access to justice. Our goal is to assist the public in identifying and understanding their legal rights and responsibilities, and in attaining self-help skills where appropriate. We do this to help people improve their ability to deal with legal issues. So we, for example, have self-help guides on handling one's own divorce or a family court application, small claims, criminal law issues. The idea is that a lot of the time people's legal problems can become worse and can become more frustrating to deal with the longer they go without access to resources to understand how to deal with them. So a legal problem that can be quite simple to fix or to address can become much bigger and much more difficult to address the longer it goes unaddressed and the longer a person goes without knowing how to respond or how to deal with it. So we are there to help try and bridge that gap between potentially expensive legal advice without giving actual legal advice, and just information about the law and what options are available to people and how to access those options. For this project, Safer Places NB, we've actually partnered with the New Brunswick Human Rights Commission. They were established in 1967 under the Human Rights Act, and the commission provides citizens with an effective way to address complaints of discrimination. They educate the public about this process and maintain an ongoing awareness of the effects of inequality and the fundamental nature of diversity and inclusivity. They also provide tools and resources to the public on how to address their legal rights. So Safer Places NB, again, you can find the URL to our website here on the screen. We partnered with the New Brunswick Human Rights Commission for this 5-year project, which spans from 2019 to 2024, on addressing and preventing sexual harassment in the workplace. And this is a project funded by Justice Canada, and it was born out of a 5-year funding agreement with them. The purpose of the project is to help address and to prevent sexual harassment in the workplace. The project has been running since 2019, and it is set to run until March 2024. So as it stands, all of the resources will be available on that website kind of in perpetuity, but the funding for certain services, for example, the lawyer referral program and the facilitated training, is still kind of up in the air after March 2024. Although the tools and resources that we developed through this project are meant to aid all employers and employees in New Brunswick, this project does have a very specific and particular focus on certain identifiable groups, including the LGBTQ2S+ community and population. The focus of this is premised on research that confirmed that current sexual harassment legislation, policies, and remedies typically use really binary gendered terms and concepts. For example, the stereotypical thought about a male boss harassing a female subordinate in the workplace. And there isn't as much information about the ways that sexual harassment can work its way into a workplace culture, or can be based on things other than sexual desire, for example, invasive and provoking questions or jokes. So while we know that 2S LGBTQ plus people are more vulnerable to harassment, this restrictive approach sometimes leads to limited definitions about what sexual harassment is, and regulates 2S LGBTQ people and others to the margin of the conversation about what sexual harassment is and how to address it. So this project is hoping to bridge some of those gaps and to help expand the idea of security and information to all. However, all of the tools and resources for this project are available to anyone. There's just a specific focus on education in that particular sphere of the topic. So to date, the project has existed in phases. So in year 1, we engaged in a series of public consultations to better understand the barriers that vulnerable groups experience when they're confronted with workplace harassment. We published a consultation report following that series of consultation, and that's available on the website under the About section. Those who participated in the consultations helped us to identify overlooked forms of harassment that might be experienced by marginalized individuals and employees generally. These pointed to barriers created by current definitions of harassment and remedies that tend to be grounded in exclusively normative, often heterosexual terms and definitions. This feedback and the recommendations that we received have informed the development of resources that will be valuable, I think, for all employers and employees, as well as legal professionals. Near the end of the project's first year, though, we also kind of coincided with the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. This definitely did create some roadblocks and some delays for us, as it did for many other workplaces and ongoing projects. We did have to pivot quite a bit in our plans. So, for example, we moved away from planned facilitated training in person, and now all of our facilitated training is delivered via Zoom. That also came with some benefits. I think it's more widely accessible throughout the province, and we were able to build in some interactive features to the Zoom platform that wouldn't necessarily have gone as smoothly in person. So there were, benefits to having to pivot to a more online focus. In year 2, we focused on developing and researching materials following those public consultations. So we underwent a period of research with volunteer and employee law students, for example, on sexual harassment in the workplace, including best practices, researching case law histories, information about particular issues that came up in the consultations, such as microaggressions. That research was used to develop most of the tools that are now available on the project website, including the facilitated training and workshops and the asynchronous training that's available online in a self-guided format. We also have sample forms and a sample harassment policy that came out of both the consultation and the research that were informed by, for example, people saying, well, I know my employer has a harassment policy, but I don't know how to file a complaint, or the complaint form I can't find anywhere. So we've created sample templates that people can use that adhere with all of the legal requirements so that they don't have to know where to find those forms in order to submit a formal complaint. And likewise for template policies, we heard from small employers that while they know what their obligations look like, they don't always have the time and the resources to engage with an HR professional to actually create that policy for themselves. In year 3, we launched a great deal of those materials on the website and the project website itself, which houses all of those materials, as well as the places to apply and inquire about our training, to access the online training, and to apply for the lawyer referral program, which I will be discussing at length throughout this presentation. We also began training employers and employees with the training that we created during our research and development phase. In year 4, so last year, we conducted another round of public consultations to identify the gaps and the barriers that could be addressed by updating our training. So through that process, for example, we identified specific industries where participants said that sexual harassment was either more prevalent or more difficult to address. So an example of this would be the service industry, where we heard from employees in such as servers or bartenders who didn't always know whether their employer actually had an obligation to address harassment if it was coming from a customer or a patron, or even if they did know that they had the right not to be harassed in that context, what they could actually do about it when that person was a paying customer. So we were able to update our facilitated training to include modules on having difficult conversations. We were able to update our employer training to explain exactly what the employer's obligation is to create a workplace free of harassment, which includes harassment from customers, patients, patrons, etc. So finally, in year 5 this year, we were able to launch the lawyer referral service. Due to, in 2022, we secured additional funding through our agreement with Justice Canada to help make this happen. So this is what I'll be speaking with you today about. And this year, we're also looking to launch a workshop that can be delivered in high school and university classrooms. I won't be discussing that at length today, but if that's something that interests you or potentially someone you know, feel free to get in touch with us because we're hoping to launch those workshops this fall. So the lawyer referral program, this newer resource that's available through the project was launched near the beginning of 2023. It's the first of its kind in New Brunswick. And the idea is that people who have experienced sexual harassment at work can contact the program. And if they qualify, they receive up to 2 hours of free legal advice from a participating lawyer who has signed up to participate in this program. It's a new initiative meant to provide New Brunswick workers with free legal advice on workplace sexual harassment and to further support employees and those who are accessing the tools and resources available through the project, through their own workplaces, and through other legal mechanisms. So regardless of where you are through the complaint process, whether you're just now starting to realize that what you're experiencing doesn't feel right, or whether you've already filed a formal complaint with your employer, or whether you're already going through some kind of legal complaint process, you can access this program and still receive legal advice from a lawyer. We've never really had any kind of lawyer referral service like this in New Brunswick. There's never been a number that you can call to get contact information for a lawyer working in a particular area of law, let alone a service that connects you to actual legal advice from those lawyers for free. So we do have a few legal clinics operating in this province. Those are held on specific days where clients are served on a kind of walk-in basis by lawyers who participate in those clinics on a volunteer basis. And those are great services. And we hope that this program will serve as a template to expand services like this and other services like it in the future, where people can access lawyers and the advice that they need a little bit more directly on a limited basis. It's meant to be available to individuals who have or who suspect that they have experienced sexual harassment in their workplace in New Brunswick. So they can meet with a lawyer to discuss the complaint process, the reporting options, next steps, etc., free of charge. And by doing this, we're hoping to bridge the gaps in access to legal advice for employees who want to know more about their rights and their options when they're navigating these often sensitive and difficult situations. So as an overview of how the service works, so there are options to contact us and apply for the service both online and by telephone to connect for general information from us at Please NB about sexual harassment. So for example, if you have general questions about sexual harassment, about what it means, how to identify it, how to address it, what a person's obligations are, the staff here at Please are able to help answer and guide a lot of those questions. For those who are experiencing harassment or a toxic culture in the workplace, they have an option then to be referred to our service, which could give them up to 2 hours of time for free with a lawyer. So this is specifically to receive advice about a person's particular situation and their options. This is something that staff at Please cannot do. So we provide general information about the law, which is not legal advice. Legal information is what the law says, where the forms are, what the procedure looks like. It never is going to include, what is best for you, what options would suit your needs best, and what, the pros and cons list actually weighs out to look like. All lawyers who are working in this project will receive sexual harassment training and trauma-informed training through Please NB and SVNB respectively, which I will elaborate on a little bit later when I discuss lawyer participation. So as an overview of summary legal advice, what do we mean when we say summary legal advice? It's advice provided on a short-term basis from a lawyer to a client, usually through a pro bono or a not-for-profit system. The lawyer does not provide the client with continuing legal services on that matter. It's really kind of a one-off, one-on-one situation where a lawyer gives a client information and advice for that very limited time period. Typically, a lawyer cannot represent a person or give them advice if they have a conflict of interest. So for example, where they were involved in a legal action against you in the past, or with somebody who is involved in a legal action, or where they have an interest in a legal action you may have been involved in. And when a lawyer is meeting with a new client, they have to make sure that there's no conflict of interest by taking steps like searching the files in their law firm to make sure that you are not an opposing party on an action that anyone in their firm was on previously, searching their files and the files in their law firm to make sure that they have not represented your employer or the employer involved in your sexual harassment issue, ensuring that neither they nor another lawyer in their firm has a personal financial interest in your legal matter, and ensuring that there are no other connections to you or the legal issue that might negatively affect their duty to you. Lawyers don't have to take all of these specific steps when they're providing summary advice. So that's worth knowing ahead of time. They really only need to consider whether they already know on a first name basis or upon meeting you that there is a conflict of interest based on your name, based on seeing you, or any other identifying information that you provide to them. They don't have to take those extra steps of searching through their law firm to find if other lawyers they know or work with have done so, or if there's something that they that doesn't immediately come to mind because it was, far enough removed from you. So the lawyer you meet with may ask to verify your identity, and they may choose to do their own conflict check, but under the professional code of conduct under the Law Society, they're not required to take all of those extra steps. This kind of loosens up their ability to meet with people on a summary basis and to provide information. So duty counsel, for example, at the courthouse operates this way, where it is meant to be a very short meeting to provide people with necessary immediate information about their case and not to be tied up with this necessary other step of going and looking through their law firm's files. For further information about the nature of conflict checks and summary legal advice, you can see the Law Society of New Brunswick's Code of Professional Conduct. This specifically appears in sections 3.42A through 3.42D. So summary legal advice can include discussing a person's options and legal issues that are at play in a situation. It can involve explaining the process for pursuing those options. It can involve consulting on legal and administrative forms, helping fill out those forms, discussing possible outcomes of your different options and telling you which ones might be best for you or how to strategically approach them so that they can kind of work in tandem best. The summary advice will not, and through this program specifically, does not include ongoing representation or other legal services regarding the legal issue. Ongoing representation basically means that through this program, the 2 hours of summary advice is limited to 2 hours. If a person comes back to us with a new or similar issue on a case-by-case basis, we will evaluate that. But generally speaking, the 2 hours is the limit. If the lawyer and the client meet and they find that they have a good rapport and the client is looking to pursue a more formal legal action, they can engage in a retainer agreement individually between the two of them. But at that point, that is outside of the scope of this program's involvement in their lawyer-client relationship. Summary advice also does not include drafting legal documents or opinions. So this could include legal briefs or arguments, a memo giving a person their formal legal opinion. It really is limited to that 2-hour meeting, and it won't necessarily include a further follow-up or a write-up of research. It doesn't include that lawyer communicating on someone's behalf. So calling an employer, calling an administrative body or a legal organization. The lawyer can help coach you on how to approach those conversations, but will not engage in that communication on your behalf through this project. It won't involve representing somebody at meetings or hearings or interviews, or otherwise in any way acting as solicitor of record on the legal issue, which basically means the lawyer that is set as the contact person and the representative for an ongoing legal issue. It also doesn't include things like travel, administrative duties associated to a legal issue, or any other services beyond that 2-hour summary advice as outlined before. We do provide lawyers and clients with a form outlining the nature of summary legal advice, and we ask that the lawyer goes through that form with the client at the beginning of the meeting so that everybody knows exactly what to expect from this meeting and what the program is able to provide. Again, if clients do want to continue working with that lawyer, they're more than welcome to ask them about establishing a private retainer between the two of them. However, that's not part of this program and should instead be arranged by the client and the lawyer privately, separate and apart from the terms of the program. We launched this program on February 28th of 2023 through a webinar jointly with the New Brunswick Human Rights Commission. We gave an overview of the purpose of the project as well as how it works and had time left for questions. I think that went really well, and we had a good deal of engagement in the form of questions at the launch and follow-up contact afterwards. You can access recordings of that launch if you want more information on the Safer Places NB.ca website under press. So how to apply for the project. So you can apply in 3 ways, essentially. You can go to the website and choose the lawyer referral option on the menu, and that will bring you to a form that you can fill out with basic information to contact you, as well as some preliminary information about the reason that you're contacting us about the service. You can also send us an email at info@saferplacesnb.ca. And you can also contact us by telephone at our 1-888 number, which is toll free, by choosing option 3, which says it's for the lawyer referral service. In all cases, staff at Please will be in touch with the person within 3 business days. It's usually that same day, but we say 3 business days because we are not a crisis organization, and just due to the nature of staffing, we can't guarantee that it will be sooner than that. But we will, within 3 business days, assess whether we should send an application form. So to qualify for the program, a person has to be 16 years or older and have experienced some form of sexual harassment at work in New Brunswick. It's okay if the person believes that they're experiencing sexual harassment and what they need is legal advice to determine whether that's actually what's going on. Examples of what might not qualify is if the harassment took place at a workplace outside of New Brunswick, because we can't give legal advice about the law and the framework outside of this province. If the harassment is explicitly not gendered or sexual in nature, it's outside of the scope of this project. Or if the harassment is sexual in nature, but it's taking place somewhere other than a workplace, it's also unfortunately outside of the scope of this project. We are equipped to give people resources and referrals to other services that might help them if their issue is outside of the scope of what we can provide. If a client qualifies, we'll contact them, and I actually do have kind of a walkthrough of the service delivery process here. So what happens is the client contacts Please NB, and one of our staff people will provide them with a registration form and a copy of the client guidelines, which explains exactly what they can and cannot expect through the scope of this project. Then the client can fill and return a completed registration form, and we will assess that registration form and determine whether or not it qualifies for the service. Sometimes what happens is a client contacts us for general information, whether it be about sexual harassment specifically or about the law more generally. And through the course of that conversation, a staff person identifies that there is a sexual harassment at work issue at play. At that point, our staff will prompt the person to be made aware that we have this program available. And if they're interested, we will also provide them with a registration form. Once we've assessed the application, if the person qualifies, we then prepare a voucher with their name on it, as well as a voucher number that's anonymized. The voucher is used by participating lawyers to confirm that the client is actually an approved one with the program. The voucher number is used for anonymized billing and record keeping so that we're able to keep our records as anonymous as possible because of the sensitive nature of the issues that are often at play here. Along with that voucher, we also provide a client with a confidentiality policy, another copy of our program guidelines, a copy of a summary of what summary legal advice is to explain what they can expect, the names of 1 to 3 lawyers that are participating in the project, and ideally those lawyers are in their regional area. If there's no lawyers available in their regional area, we will provide the names of lawyers who have agreed to take telephone or virtual appointments. So then at that point, we ask that the client contacts the lawyer of their choice from the list that we've provided to set up a meeting with the lawyer for their summary advice. We do it this way because through our consultations and our research, we determined that for a trauma-informed approach, we wanted to make sure that people had as much sense of choice and agency as possible. So rather than assign people to a particular lawyer or to take care of actually booking those appointments ourselves, we've tried to provide people with the names of lawyers that they can either look into their backgrounds or determine, who's closest or who they seem more comfortable with, and set up that appointment themselves. So far, that's been going well, although it's open to being revisited if we find that that isn't the best way to be handling it. The client then provides a copy of the voucher to the lawyer, so the lawyer can actually confirm that the person is approved to access the program. Clients then can have that initial 2-hour consultation to receive summary advice from the lawyer. That can also be 2 1-hour appointments. Really, the voucher is for 2 hours. It doesn't have to be 1 2-hour appointment, and it's not necessarily true that if you have an appointment that only lasts 1 hour, that you've kind of lost out on the extra potential time through the project. The voucher is for 2 full hours that the person is entitled to through this project. So through that meeting, again, that can involve summary advice, reviewing a situation, exploring options, potential recourse, and potential outcomes. Afterwards, after the meeting, a lawyer fills out a template invoice that we've provided to them, and invoices please NB for the standard rate that we pay through this project. So all of the invoicing goes through us, which is really how this project works. Rather than billing the client at the end of the meeting like they normally would, they fill out our invoice and bill us instead. At that point, once we received the anonymized invoice with the voucher number on it, we're able to send feedback surveys to the clients to ensure that everything worked smoothly or to receive feedback from the people accessing the program. So as an overview of the program's policies document, I have some examples of what they look like on the next slides, but just briefly, for lawyers, we have a copy of, we have a registration form and we have a copy of the program guidelines for lawyers. We have the training acknowledgement form, which is our way of having them declare and confirm formally that they've taken the necessary training, which I'll outline in a few slides, as well as the template invoice. For clients, we have a registration form and a program guidelines for clients, which just has simplified and less legalese language, as well as that acknowledgement of summary advice form. So they fully understand exactly what they can expect when they're accessing the program. And everybody who's participating in the program receives a copy of the confidentiality policy. And just for an idea of what our branded policy forms look like, this is the first page of the client program guidelines, and this is the first page of the acknowledgement of summary legal advice. So you'll see we've tried to keep it bullet point form, very simplified, plain language version of what can be kind of complex wording in the Code of Conduct. So the uptake to date, we've received 16 direct inquiries from people who want to access the program and have said that they're interested in applying. We've received 8 completed client application forms and have approved each and every one of those. The discrepancy between these two numbers is probably for 2 reasons. A person may have asked for a registration form but did not return it, or in the course of a conversation with Please staff, the person may have determined that they do not qualify for the service. So for example, we have spoken to people who were experiencing sexual harassment somewhere like school, which unfortunately is just outside of our scope, and we would have had to refer them elsewhere. Again, we are equipped to provide general information as well about other legal matters, so the Human Rights Act, the criminal process, and referrals to other helping agencies like Sexual Violence New Brunswick. Of the 8 approved clients, so far 4 of them have actually resulted in a meeting with a lawyer for which we've been invoiced. 2 of those meetings only took 1 of the 2 hours, and 2 of them took all 2 hours. The client, again, has the option to follow up and exhaust the remaining hour, but so far it's just been that kind of uptake since February. Lawyers who are participating in the project, we have 14 in the province of New Brunswick currently signed up and ready to take referrals for the service. The highest concentration of lawyers who are participating right now are located in the Moncton and Fredericton regions. The majority of them are in those 2 places. And we're actually looking to recruit more lawyers in the St. John area because that has been a bit of an issue of late. So please, again, spread the word if you know some lawyers who are in the southern or southwestern part of the province, if this is something they might be interested in. The overview of the lawyer's process, in order to receive referrals, they have to first take 2 training modules. So we provide them with a 1-hour training session specifically on workplace sexual harassment. This is an area of general competency and a lot of lawyers are going to know about it, but this is going to delve into the values of the Safer Places project and the specifics of the areas of law that are most likely to come up in these kinds of meetings. And then we also ask that they take a 3-hour online training provided by Sexual Violence New Brunswick called Trauma-Informed Practice for Civil Litigators. And this is a training module that is meant to increase lawyers' competency in delivering legal services in a way that is informed by trauma, is more sensitive to those kinds of needs. And we do not refer clients to lawyers until they acknowledge that they have taken both of those training modules. So we may have more than 14 lawyers who have contacted us to participate in the program, but only 14 of those lawyers are going to be actually provided with referrals at this point, because we are really committed to making sure that if we're sending referrals their way, we can confirm that they've had access to the education that we've deemed necessary in order to deliver legal advice in a sensitive and responsible way. Lawyers who participate in this project are paid by the hour. So for those 2 hours, they're paid for each one. Right now, that is calculated based on the legal aid rates in New Brunswick. So currently that's set at $70 per hour plus HST. That's the rate that matches what a 5-year call at legal aid would be making. So a little bit more about the resources available through Safer Places NB. I've kind of given you an overview of the lawyer referral project, and please feel free to send me your questions if you have any. But as an overview of what else you can find on our website, we have some FAQs. We have, again, training for employees and training for employers. Those are two respective and distinct workshops. Really, the difference between the two is that the employee workshop is about an hour and a half long, whereas the employer workshop is more like 3 hours long. The employer workshop involves all of the information in the employee workshop about sexual harassment, how to identify it, how to address it, but then also includes an entire other module around the employer's obligations, what an investigation looks like, what the risks are to an employer if they don't address this properly. And you can access that training either by requesting a facilitated session with one of our staff via Zoom, or you can take it online in an asynchronous format at your own pace. We also have what's called a guided pathway. So this was also launched this year, so it wouldn't have been around last year when I was speaking about the project. But the idea of this is that we have created a page on the website where a person can get a general overview about the main legal areas where somebody might be looking to address sexual harassment. So for example, a human rights complaint, either provincially or federally, an issue within their workplace, like an internal complaint, a complaint to the police through a criminal investigation. And if they choose any one of those options, the guided pathway is meant to give people an overview of each step of that process so that they understand what they can and can't get out of that process, how much control they can anticipate having over that process, and things like how long it could take and exactly what that looks like. So for example, at a human rights complaint, at what point is there a hearing? Are there usually hearings? What does that actually mean? What can a human rights commission actually give me? People don't always know when they make a complaint about sexual harassment what the possible outcomes are. So this is kind of meant to help inform people about what they can expect from a process, because when people don't know what's going to happen next, that can often contribute to their re-traumatization. We also have pages with case studies about actual human rights and legal cases that have involved sexual harassment and what those outcomes were, and Mythbusters about the law around sexual harassment. We also have a glossary for 2S LGBTQIA terms to help inform people about how to discuss these issues more respectfully and in a more informed manner. So I am prepared to take some questions. I think I should have about 10 minutes left. There are some resources up here on the page if you're interested in accessing any of our resources or the New Brunswick Human Rights Commission website. But please do feel free to ask any questions about the service if you have them.
Thanks so much for that, Amber. It's such an exciting set of resources. I know I often will recommend, when I'm doing training on harassment in general, I'll often recommend that employers and employees access your training and your tools and resources, because it's so exciting that these things are available and free and done in a way that's really accessible, not only so that they can accessible as in online and available to them, but also accessible as in the language is clear, the concepts are well explained. So thank you so much for presenting on that to us. As we're waiting for some questions to come in, if anyone has any questions, I'm really interested in knowing what led, please, to decide to have the lawyers who registered take a trauma-informed training as well before they were allowed to give service?
So that came out honestly for a few reasons. First and foremost, a core tenet of this project's values and mandate included a trauma-informed approach from the start. So that was part of our initial commitment to our funder. It was part of our initial research and development of a material stage on, what exactly is a trauma-informed approach and how do we implement it into the materials and approach of this project. It also comes out of the values of the staff here at Please, where we don't feel responsible actually connecting people with a lawyer if we can't say with certainty that that lawyer has at least been informed about how to approach these issues in a way that is sensitive and delicate and respectful. And finally, actually, SBMB actually launched that trauma-informed practice for litigators training at the exact same time as we were launching our lawyer referral service. So they were actually looking for help finding pilot lawyers to take the program. So it really ended up working out great where that training service is actually a $300 cost for lawyers, and it's eligible for CPD, continuing professional development hours with the Law Society. But if the lawyer is participating in our project, they've actually been given permission to take it for free.
That's really interesting that that timing worked out, but so great that there is a resource there available already from a well-respected organization so that Please didn't have to develop something yourselves.
Yeah.
One of the first questions that's come in actually is about SVNB. One of our attendees has said that they've accessed their services before, SVNB services. For anyone who's listening to me and doesn't know what SVNB is, that's Sexual Violence New Brunswick. They're just curious if there is a partnership with them. You said there's a partnership to access their training.
Yeah, we have an ongoing relationship with SVNB. I would say like our staff and their staff are regularly in contact with one another. Just due to the nature of our work, we often end up dealing with intersecting issues. So we're aware of their services and likewise they're aware of ours, and we do make mutual referrals. More formally, we're actually partnering on another project that SVNB is working on right now called the ILA Plus program, which is very similar to the lawyer referral program, where it's going to be helping connect people directly with lawyers to receive summary legal advice. The nice thing about SVMB's program is that it is not limited to sexual harassment in the workplace. It's sexual harassment of sexual violence of any kind. So we're helping to connect them with lawyers and manage that lawyer roster, but we'll be making mutual referrals depending on which program seems more appropriate, or maybe the person wants to access both.
So in the way you were saying that you hope that this program can be a model for other people, other ways to access, other ways to encourage better access to legal advice for individuals in New Brunswick, SBNB is taking that and running with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And they've
That's
been
really
doing some
exciting.
great independent work, but we've done everything we can to help support them and provide them with information about how we set ours up.
That's really exciting. We have a question here. One of the attendees has asked, is there a time limit from when the incident occurred to when it is reported for your service?
So not for our service. We don't have a time limit to access our service. Practically speaking, there absolutely are time limits. And that can sometimes be part of the legal advice. Sometimes the legal advice you need is there a limitation period, which is what we call it as lawyers. We call it a limitation period for filing some kind of legal claim to address an issue. And depending on the nature of the claim you want to make, that limitation period is going to be different. So, for example, I know with a Human Rights Commission, that limitation period is just 1 year. So, if you may wait more than 1 year from an incident that happened that violated your human rights, you don't necessarily have the option to file a complaint if it's been more than a year. Now, there are exceptions to that. What's called a continuing contravention under the Act means something's been ongoing. It doesn't matter if it started 5 years ago. If it's still happening or things similar from the same person or people are still happening, that time limit doesn't necessarily end. But if it's been a year since the last incident, that can be an issue. Same thing with criminal processes. Depending on what kind of crime it is, sometimes there are limitation periods and sometimes there aren't.
When you talk about Please giving general information about legal things, I'm guessing that an answer that like that is the kind of thing that people can get as well if they call the please line to get general information.
Yeah, and this is actually a great opportunity to get into the nitty-gritty of what's the difference between information and advice. So information would be under the Human Rights Act, the limitation to file a human rights complaint is 1 year. Legal advice would be based on what you've told me, you're inside the limitation period or you're outside of the limitation period. We
Mm.
couldn't confirm for somebody whether or not their particular issue kind of is on one side or the other of that line.
That's really interesting because I don't know, for those of us who aren't lawyers, that that specific distinction seems so small to us, but I'm
Yeah.
sure for lawyers like yourself and for the lawyers that are working at Please and then working in your referral program, that line is very clear.
Yeah, exactly. It's part of our training. We have like handouts and do's and don'ts. It is a very important part of becoming a lawyer is really identifying that distinction between information and advice because information, I mean, should be free and widely available for anyone under any circumstances, but legal advice is very highly regulated and it's very important to know when you're crossing that line.
Hmm. We have another question here. An attendee has asked, if a client wanted a second opinion, could they split their 2 hours between two lawyers?
There's nothing within our program guidelines that would prohibit that. It would definitely require them coming back to us and explaining what was going on. But absolutely, like this is also available under a legal aid certificate, right? Sometimes people just don't jive, and that doesn't even need to mean that the lawyer did anything wrong or got anything wrong. Just like when you're looking for the right, therapist or the right professional of any kind, sometimes you do just don't click with that person or don't feel right about the advice you got. So there's no reason in particular why we wouldn't be able to help somebody access a second opinion if that's what they determined they needed. Because again, from this trauma-informed approach, it's really important to us that within the scope of what we can provide under our funding agreement and under our program guidelines, we give people as much options and as much control as possible.
So if someone, if I'm understanding it correctly, if someone wanted to say that their first voucher, they could use an hour to go to a specific lawyer. If they wanted to then go to a different lawyer, they would come back for a separate voucher.
I don't actually know that they would need to come back for a separate voucher. They might need to communicate with us just so that we have a heads up about what to expect, but
Mm.
we log the information anonymously based on the voucher number. And when we receive a bill from a client, we allocate the number of hours under that voucher from the lawyer. So if a lawyer has only billed for 1 hour, that 1 hour is deducted from the voucher. There's still the one remaining hour, and we don't have a rule that says that remaining hour has to come from the same lawyer.
So that speaks really to the way that you're trying to give a lot of control and ability to make decisions to the people who are accessing the program.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I'm, we have a minute left. The question I'm really been wondering is how are you finding the campaign to get the information out? How do you find that you're able to, are you able to get the information out? Uh, you know, do you find that it's people are becoming aware of this program because it's an incredible program?
People are definitely becoming aware. We definitely saw a lag in people contacting us in the like late spring, early summer, between kind of the word and the media press about the launch definitely triggered a lot of inquiries, and then it kind of died off in the summer. We're seeing a little bit more people contacting us again now, and I think that's because other agencies are starting to refer people to us.
Mm.
WorkSafe is aware of what we're doing, SVMB is aware of what we're doing. Other agencies we're hearing, people were referred here from a professional they contacted outside of the legal system. But I strongly believe that the numbers that we have don't reflect the number of people who are experiencing sexual harassment at work. And that's something the Human Rights Commission is aware of as well, that the number of people who file a complaint every year based on sexual harassment cannot represent the number of people who are actually experiencing sexual harassment at work. So part of that might be that people don't know they have legal rights, and part of that might be that people don't know that their situation counts as sexual harassment. But a lot of it is probably just that the people don't know about the fact that we exist. So we've actually engaged a company to run some radio ads this fall that will
Mm.
hopefully drive more engagement. And we're looking for other creative ideas like that because, focusing just on social media, just on engaging with other partnering agencies or traditional media isn't necessarily going to reach everybody.
I agree with you. Working in the field, in conflict management and doing interventions, there's definitely a much lower reporting rate in all kinds of harassment, especially sexual harassment. And then on top of that, as you said in your presentation, especially with folks who are coming from the 2S LGBTQIA community, who may feel more vulnerable to retaliation if they report.
Yeah,
And
or who
so,
may have been taught that it's not sexual harassment because they're not coming on to you. They're just asking really rude questions, like that's still
absolutely.
sexual harassment, but because it's not sexualized, it's not always treated the same way.
Absolutely. I think that the resources that you've put together do a wonderful job at explaining that, but of course, then it's getting folks out to access those resources. I want to thank you so much, Amber, for this presentation. It's been so exciting to watch the Safer Places program grow, to watch the number of resources multiply. I would encourage everyone who's attending today to go check out your resources. I'm not joking when I say I encourage folks when I do trainings on harassment to go get your resources. I play your Mythbuster videos in my sessions. I am going to close out this session.
Oh yeah, I'll
Thank you. Oh, sure.
stop
Thank
sharing
you
my
so
screen.
much, Amber. We have